In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how to build this used $400 gaming PC build, a price point that I've never featured on the channel before, and this may look familiar to an older build that I did at the beginning of the year, but there are indeed some worthwhile changes. Let's get into it. Hey, welcome to Zach's Tech Turf. Today I'm going to be showing you how to build this baller $400 every last bang for your buck 6-core Xeon gaming PC build guide. And if you're new here and you want to see more gaming PC build guides like this one, then hit the subscribe button down below and also the notification bell. That way you never miss an episode. But before we get into it, a quick word from today's sponsor. Today's video is brought to you by Pulseway, which is a really neat remote monitoring and management software that I've actually deployed across my entire network down here in my studio. Pulseway is an all-in-one network management platform that allows you to remotely monitor and even control all of your devices that you installed the lightweight client on, which by the way, pretty much every operating system is supported. I personally really like the phone application because it allows me to quickly see what's going on with all of my devices, such as their temperatures, what processes are running, and I can even run scripts and perform Windows updates no matter where I'm at in the world. For us PC gamers, this is perfect because it allows us to start up those lengthy Windows updates while we're away, so we know our gaming rigs are 100% good to go when we get home. There's also pages and pages of notification settings to configure so you can get all sorts of alerts from your devices. Head on down to the first link in the description to score yourself a free version account which supports up to 2 devices, or use discount code ZTT to save 2 months off your next subscription. Alright, so starting with the parts list, the main bread and butter piece of this build guide is the Dell Studio XPS 9100 OEM desktop. These Dell Studios are actually a little difficult to find at the right price, but when you finally do snipe one, boy are they certainly worth it. This XPS 9100 came with an X58 motherboard, which we all know allows us to put a beefy 6-core Xeon in there for some pure price to performance action. I bought this entire OEM for $120. It actually came with an i7-960 that I really had no interest in. It came with 12 gigabytes of RAM and triple channel, and it even came with a Radeon 5870, which I also had no interest in. Basically, you're paying for the X58 motherboard and the RAM in this build. Those alone can cost $120 to be honest, but yeah, you're also getting a completed system, which is definitely a huge plus. To upgrade the i7-960, like I said, this is where you get your money's value, as I installed a 6-core and 12-threaded Xeon X5680 that boosts up to 3.6 gigahertz, and I only paid $43 for this used off eBay. Next up, we get to the graphics card, and like I said, I had no interest in the 5870 that it came with. Let me know down in the comment section if you want to see a dedicated video on that card, by the way, and I decided to replace that graphics card with an XFX 8GB RX 480, which you can find used for around $100. This RX 480 will certainly allow us to play any game in 1080p at pretty decent frame rates, but I definitely wouldn't recommend going any higher than a 480 when paired with the CPU. Honestly, there's going to be some games where the older Xeon processor can't hang with the 480. It's not going to be a terrible bottleneck or anything, but yeah, I just won't go any beefier than an RX 480 for this system. Next up, we have the power supply, and here I went with a Corsair CX500M that I found used for just $30, and this thing will definitely supply this system with enough power. Feel free to go with any power supply around this price range and performance. So you may have noticed that this build looks very similar to a $350 build guide that I did at the beginning of the year, but where things get different are the storage options. In this build, which costs $50 more than the last one, I decided to throw in a whopping 1TB SSD because that's honestly going to be the normal here in 2019. More and more of you guys are commenting in the comment section to stop with the smaller SSDs and the bigger HDDs, so I felt the need to change things up a bit. The 1TB SSD that I decided to go with is from SK Hynix. You may recognize them if you're familiar with business grade hardware like RAM. I buy their RAM all the time at work, and yeah, this is their first SSD that they're throwing on the market, so they decided to send it over. This 1TB SSD is rocking 560 megabyte per second read and 520 megabyte per second write speeds, which are fantastic, and you're getting that quality SK Hynix guarantee with a 5-year warranty. Where things aren't that pretty is that this X58 motherboard doesn't support SATA 3 speeds, it only supports SATA 2, 2, so we are going to be capped around 300 megabytes per second, but that's not the SSD's fault. You're not getting the full quality out of this SSD, but I would still recommend any 1TB SSD that you can get your hands on for this system. With that being said, here's what the full parts list is looking like, and as you can see, we are a bit over the $400 mark, but I think you can get it closer to $400 if you went with the cheaper SSD. The only reason why I included the SK Hynix one was because they sent it to me, so feel free to go with whichever one you find the most value on. Now it's time for my favorite part of the build, the gaming benchmarks, and I do want to talk about live streaming performance on this gaming PC build as well. We'll do that after the gaming benchmarks, so make sure you stay tuned for that. The first game up was Fortnite, and with 1080p in pro settings, basically low with epic view distance, here I averaged 138 frames per second, and I did indeed lock the FPS to 144 because that's where my monitor was at. Feel free to smash that like button, by the way, because I actually managed to get a kill during the benchmarking run. Following that was Counter-Strike Global Offensive, also got a kill in this one, and in 1080p in pro settings I averaged a very impressive 176 frames per second. After that I fired up PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, and in 1080p in pro settings yet again, here I averaged a very respectable 93 frames per second. After that it was time for Rainbow Six Siege. This one always runs buttery smooth on these used budget builds, and in 1080p in high settings I got a solid FPS average of 161. Getting into a bit tougher to run games, I fired up Far Cry New Dawn, and in 1080p and medium settings with the built-in benchmarking tool, this $400 gaming PC managed to average right on the money at 60 frames per second. Following that was the super tough to run Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and this one proved to be a little bit challenging for our older Xeon, as in 1080p and medium settings I could only average 40 frames per second. Next up was The Division 2, trying to throw some more modern benchmarks in here compared to the similar $350 build I did for you guys about a year ago, and in 1080p in medium settings with the built-in benchmarking tool, this system averaged 65 frames per second. And finally, the most modern benchmark, and my personal favorite benchmark of them all now, I decided to test out WoW Classic because honestly I just want to get a few more minutes into playing this game. Here in 1080p with the absolute max settings that it could possibly go, this system averaged 150 frames per second. And finally, for our only non-gaming benchmark, for those of you that are interested, in 3D Mark TimeSpy's benchmark, this system got a score of 3,745. With the results out of the way, which are very impressive for a $400 used gaming PC build if I do say so myself, I now want to talk about live streaming with this gaming PC. The reason why I've been live streaming for the past couple of months is so I can learn the ins and outs of live streaming, adjusting the settings and whatnot, so I can eventually test live streaming with these budget build guides that I do. I do think that I'm gonna need to make a dedicated video on that, so make sure you stay tuned for that in the very near future. Make sure you hit that subscribe button to see that upcoming video, but I do want to do a full rundown on how this PC performed as a single PC streaming setup, so be on the lookout for that. Well, that wraps up my used $400 gaming PC build guide. As always, drop a comment down below about what you thought of this system or what you would personally do to change it. After that, feel free to head on over to one of these two videos if you haven't seen them yet, and definitely hit that subscribe button because coming up next, some more benchmarking. You don't want to miss that video.